1980. Ronald Reagan was elected President of the United States. In the television industry, millions of Dallas viewers were left wondering, who shot J.R. Ewing? They got their answer on November 21st. The Children's Television Workshop, producers of Sesame Street, introduced 3-2-1 Contact to PBS. The music industry suffered a tragic loss when John Lennon, guitarist of the Beatles, was shot. The film industry brought us The Shining and The Empire Strikes Back.
Here's Johnny. I am the father.
In the sports industry, the Philadelphia Phillies won their first World Series title. The New York Islanders won their first Stanley Cup. The winner of the Boston Marathon that year was exposed as a fraud and denied her award.
Doing 26 miles? It's not fair!
In the video game industry, Atari released Dave Thurr's arcade shoot-'em-up, Missile Command, as well as Battlezone. They also released Warren Robinette's Adventure for the Atari video computer system. It was the game that pioneered the video game Easter egg. All the while, Namco, having bought Atari's Japanese division a few years prior, released their most commercially successful video arcade game. It succeeded where many arcade games that came before failed. It brought women into arcades. It made a ton of quarters in its first year alone. It had its own cartoon series and even a hit song. Atari obtained the license to release it on their VCS, only to see it crash and burn. It's hard to believe that this big-time arcade game began its development with a pizza. Ladies and gentlemen, Gaming Delight presents the story of Pac-Man. Before we get to Pac-Man, let's start by looking at how Namco got into video games. Founded in 1955 by Masaya Nakamura as Nakamura Seisakusho Company, Namco had originally focused on operating amusement rides on the roof of a department store in Yokohama, Japan, before moving on to coin-operated electromechanical games. In 1974, Atari's Japanese division was struggling. They turned to Namco to distribute games in exchange for a share of the proceeds. Masaya Nakamura agreed, but it wasn't enough. Atari Japan's profits continued to plummet. General Manager Hideyuki Nakajima, a veteran of the Japan Art Paper Company, tried his best to keep business going, even by using his own personal savings. In the end, the real culprits were his own employees. Atari, also losing money in their North American division, decided to sell their Japanese division to the highest bidder. At first, Sega offered to purchase Atari Japan for $50,000. But Namco, seeing it as a golden opportunity to switch from electromechanical to video games, put in a bid of $550,000 down and $250,000 a year for 3 years. Atari accepted the offer and gave Namco the rights to distribute their games in Japan. Using the resources gained from this transaction, Namco churned out a slew of video arcade games, beginning with GB in 1978. Although GB couldn't compete with Space Invaders, it did help Namco gain a decent foothold in the market. A year later, the arcade shoot-'em-up Galaxian was released, to major success. But Namco needed a true blockbuster hit. 24-year-old Toru Iwatani, who created GB, was given the task of developing such a game. He discovered that video arcades were places where men played. Most games at the time focused on battling aliens. Nothing was available for women. Iwatani wanted to change that. Week after week, he visited arcades to monitor what sort of people played what kind of games and thought about the kind of games that might interest women. He decided on a game that was more colorful and adorable. As Namco was in the development stages of this new concept, Toru Iwatani went to a pizza parlor. When he removed a slice of pizza, he made an amusing discovery. A pizza with a slice removed looked like a head with an open mouth. Iwatani had found a character for his new game. He figured his game could be based around eating rather than blasting things. Many arcade games at the time were heavy on shooting aliens. A game based around eating would certainly appeal to women. Iwatani initially considered his game to have an animated pizza running around a maze eating everything in sight, but due to technical limitations, he and his team settled on a simple yellow circle eating dots. They gave the character the name Pac-Man after the Japanese slang paku, which is used to describe a munching sound. The next step was to create an enemy. Iwatani came up with 4 ghosts with beady little eyes. He got his inspiration from manga he read, including Little Ghost Q Taro. He claims he was also inspired by the Casper the Friendly Ghost cartoon series. Initially, Masaya Nakamura wanted all 4 ghosts to be red, but Iwatani was against the idea as he wanted each ghost to be different. This resulted in a survey, asking whether the ghost should be multicolored or all red. The final result was unanimous. 40 voted multicolored, while nobody voted all red. Having seen these results, Nakamura relented. The 4 ghosts were given the following names: Red, Oikake, meaning chaser; Pink, Machibuse, or ambusher; Blue, Kimagure, or fickle; and Orange, Otoboke, translating to stupid. The next step was to give his protagonist a way to turn the tables on the ghost. Iwatani may have gotten the inspiration for the power pellets from Popeye and his knack for eating spinach, which gave him the ability to beat Bluto. By eating a pellet, the ghosts would turn blue, rendering them temporarily vulnerable. But once eaten, they would retreat to their hiding place and revert to normal. The sound effects of the game were created by Toshio Kai. By noisily munching on fruit and making gurgling noises, Iwatani described to Kai how he wanted the gobbling effect to sound. At last, the game was complete. The game was titled Pac-Man, based on the character's working title and the fact that he was shaped like a hockey puck. On May 22, 1980, the game was tested in Shibuya with positive results. A month later came a private showing with the same result. On July of 1980, Pac-Man officially launched in arcades nationwide. Pac-Man became a modest success, though Space Invaders was still well out in front. Although arcade operators accepted Pac-Man, they weren't quite ready to give up on Taito's cash cow. To add insult to injury, Namco's own Galaxian also cut into Pac-Man's profits. Nevertheless, the game had more than enough popularity for Namco to take it international. In 1978, with business going smoothly at Namco, Hideyuki Nakajima asked Masaya Nakamura to open a subsidiary in North America. Thus was born Namco America. It was located not too far from Atari's offices in Sunnyvale, California. Late in 1980, to license their Yellow Dot Muncher, Namco America reached out to Midway Manufacturing for a licensing deal. Midway agreed. However, Namco feared that the name Pac-Man would be vandalized, such as the P in the name being changed to an F. Yeesh. Masaya Nakamura decided to change the name to something closer to the original Japanese title. He chose Pac-Man. The game and the character have maintained that name ever since. The ghosts were renamed Shadow, Speedy, Bashful, and Pokey in North America, respectively nicknamed Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde. In October of 1980, Pac-Man was officially released in North America. Let's dive into the game itself. You control Pac-Man, and you must use the joystick to guide him through the maze to eat dots while avoiding the ghosts. Each ghost has their own distinct quality. Blinky, being the leader, is the most aggressive towards our hero. More often than not, he'll keep chasing and chasing you while you're in his sight. Pinky follows your path, but not you yourself. She can also go around walls to beat you. Inky is extremely hazardous. While Blinky's only target is Pac-Man, Inky has elements from each of the other ghosts. And Clyde? He's the least intelligent of them all. He's just there to do as he pleases. But seeing how random he is, you never can tell with him. But no matter which ghost chases you, the side doors on either side of the maze warp you from one side of the maze to the other. The pursuing ghosts slow down while going through these exits. Occasionally, a bonus item will appear beneath the ghost's hiding place, usually fruit. And if you eat that, you get bonus points. From the 100-point cherries to the 5,000-point key. One notable bonus item is the Galaxian flagship. Quite a neat Easter egg if you don't mind my saying so. Eating one of the power pellets in the corners of the maze turns all the ghosts blue and harmless, giving you the opportunity to eat them for bonus points. 200 for one, 400 for the second, 800 for the third, and 1600 for the fourth. You get an extra life at 10,000 points, and every time you clear 2 levels, you get a cutscene of Pac-Man and the ghosts. The highest conceivable score to achieve is 3,333,360 points. However, in December of 1982, 8-year-old Jeffrey Yee scored 6,131,940.
It took me 7 hours.
Other sources claim that higher scores have been achieved by others. How is that even possible if you can't even get past the level 256 split-screen glitch? Well, over a decade ago, one user on the Atari Age forums stated that Yee told him that after level 256, his father put in his second quarter and combined his score from the second with his score from the first. To be fair, at the time, video games were still relatively new to the community, and since these guys were playing on their own, there were no official rules against high scores in a single arcade game from 2 or more consecutive quarters. Some of these high-scoring players follow patterns. For more information on Pac-Man patterns, there's books online, as well as tutorial videos on YouTube. Upon this release, Pac-Man became a national phenomenon. Arcade gamers raved all over.
It is kind of nice. It's kind of nice too when you go out with your friends and you're at a bar or something and you don't tell them you work here. And you just go up to the Pac-Man and start playing and get a real good score. Freak them out.
I like the little guys to go by and jump on everything. Little Pac-Man is so cute. It is, it's so cute.
Space Invaders seems boring, you know, you just shoot at the dudes, but in Pac-Man it's more exciting. What makes Pac-Man cute?
Because his little metal.
After a full year on the market, Pac-Man garnered over $1 billion in quarters. To add to that, over 100,000 arcade cabinets were sold, resulting in an additional revenue of over $2 billion. With the success came Pac-Man memorabilia, including cereal, bedsheets, clothing, lunchboxes, posters, toys, stickers, trading cards, puppets, and even a board game. Pac-Man even got his own animated series in 1982 by Hanna-Barbera Productions. And who could forget Buckner and Garcia's smash hit based on the game, Pac-Man Fever. Coleco even released a tabletop mini-arcade version of the game in 1981. Tomy also released a Pac-Man LCD handheld. But this was only the beginning for Namco and the Little Yellow Gobbler. Dozens of sequels and spin-offs came about, although some of these, particularly Miss Pac-Man, Super Pac-Man, Pac-Land, and Pac-Mania, are so popular they deserve their own episodes. The game even spawned ports on various home consoles and personal computers. One in particular is the version for the Atari 2600. With the success of Pac-Man in the arcades, game developers knew that a home console version would surely sell like hotcakes. By 1981, Atari was given the license to produce and release it for the Atari Video Computer System, also known as the Atari 2600. Handling the programming task was Todd Fry. Fry didn't have arcade design specs to work from, so he had to play the game to find out how it worked. Fry had to finish the game by September of 1981, and it had to be done on a 4KB ROM cartridge, as 8KB ROM cartridges, though barely new, were more expensive. He also thought that Pac-Man should have a 2-player option, which ate up much of the console's limited memory of 128 bytes. But he didn't know the background of the arcade game was black, and thus made it blue for the home port. It's also believed that Atari had a home product policy against non-space games having black backgrounds. However, there's no solid evidence to suggest this. Fry had to make some additional compromises for the home port to get around the system's limitations, including changing the 244 dots to 126 wafers, simplifying the maze to be more repetitive, cutting much of the scoring system to 10%, replacing the bonus items with a single 100-point vitamin, and flickering ghosts. Unable to implement a flicker management system, he had to make each ghost appear once every 4 frames, which made it hard to tell them apart by color. After the game was complete, Atari fought valiantly to not only promote, but protect its license of Pac-Man. They even took legal actions against other companies for their Pac-Man clones, such as Philips' KC Munchkin for the Magnavox Odyssey 2. Anticipation for the release mounted. Atari boasted they had well over 3 million pre-orders of Pac-Man by the end of 1981. At last, on March 16, 1982, Pac-Man was released for the Atari 2600. Gamers would be able to play Pac-Man without having to spend so many quarters at an arcade. Atari had shipped over 1 million cartridges in less than a month. Atari launched a $1.5 million campaign to promote the game, and on April 3rd, they held National Pac-Man Day. It was an event that had contests, prizes, and even the opportunity to meet the Yellow Gobbler himself, all in over 20 cities throughout North America, including Dodger Stadium during pre-game events. National Pac-Man Day is still celebrated to this very day. For a while, the launch of the home console version of Pac-Man did Atari a world of good. Sales of the Atari 2600 went up dramatically. The launch also convinced retailers, even drugstores, to enlarge inventory to sell video games. To add to that, Atari paid Todd Fry a dime in royalties for every cartridge manufactured. Regardless of how much sold, he became a millionaire. But the momentum fizzled fast, mainly on account of how the game looked. Critics were appalled at the game's severe deviation from the original arcade game, as well as the flickering ghosts, which proved to be a distraction. Electronic Games rated it 4 out of 10, while Electronic Fun with Computers and Games rated it B-, giving the graphics a C. The inaugural issue of Video Games Player simply called it, quote, just awful. Atari wouldn't make the same mistakes again with Miss Pac-Man in 1983 and Junior Pac-Man in 1986. Atari did release a port of Pac-Man for their new Atari 5200, and its graphics were almost identical to the arcade version.
Now you're talking. But
it still wasn't perfect, thanks in large part to the Atari 5200 controller's non-centering joystick. A port with the same graphics did show up on Atari's 8-bit home computers, though, and the controls were better. And if you can believe it, Atari also released Pac-Man on Mattel's Intellivision. Seriously! I'm guessing this gave Coleco the idea to port Donkey Kong to the Atari 2600 as well as their own ColecoVision. Nevertheless, Atari's Pac-Man for the 2600 went on to become one of the many factors in the video game crash of 1983, but that, my friends, is a subject for a later video. Of course, it would be unfair to blame Todd Fry for this mess of a port, and I seriously doubt Atari in general was entirely at fault. Fry was given the task to port an early 80s arcade game to a late 70s video game system, and he was told to port it to a 4KB ROM cartridge instead of an 8KB. On top of that, much of Atari's best coders had left the company. Some even went on to found Activision to make their own games and credit their programmers. It's fair to wonder how Atari's Pac-Man could have fared had programmers like David Crane stayed with the company and had been given the task of programming it. So what do I think of Atari's Pac-Man? Well, it's okay. Todd Fry did his best with what he had, just like Gary Kitchen did with Donkey Kong. But you know, this game makes me think about my grandfather. Because long before I was born, my grandfather loved this game. My aunt told me that when he got her an Atari 2600 along with a copy of Pac-Man, he played all day. I'm not sure if he even gave my aunt a chance to play. Every time I play Pac-Man, especially this version, I think of him. I miss you, Gramps. So how much impact did Pac-Man leave on the industry? Well, quite a lot.
Pac-Man alone digested $200 million for its manufacturer, Bally Corporation's Midway. No human could begin to compute how many Pac-Man dots were gobbled up, how many little children and adults spent their free time at the joystick of a video game control. One study estimates that we spent 75,000 man-years doing this.
It takes a while to get the hang of any of them, but there are ways that you can stretch your video quarter to rack up more points and make your games last longer. We consulted a variety of experts and players and spent quite a few quarters to find the winning strategy.
It succeeded where pretty much every arcade game before failed. It brought women into arcades, just as Toru Iwatani had hoped.
I like the little man. He's really neat. He eats up all the other things, you know.
How about that Pac-Man song that I hear around here all the time?
Yeah, you sing it a lot. You hum it. Any normal person would want to beat the machine.
And you come back?
Oh, sure.
Again?
Oh, sure.
Again?
Yeah.
In a Q&A with Game Informer, when asked if he was surprised about the Pac-Man boom in the US, Iwatani stated, "I initially thought it wouldn't do well in the US, where gamers sought games that offered thrills and excitement. I suppose the simple game mechanic and cute characters resonated well with male and female, young and old alike, but I never expected it to blow up like that. Pac-Man has had its effect on many a gamer and developer for over 40 years. It inspired Namco to come up with more maze chase games, including Rally X and Dig Dug. The game also had an influence on id Software's John Romero. Thus, Wolfenstein 3D was given a Pac-Man level. In May of 2010, in honor of the game's 30th anniversary, Google changed its homepage to a playable Pac-Man game. It was played by over 1 billion users worldwide. Thus, Google gave the game its own page, and it's still playable today. In 2014, Nintendo released Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U and 3DS. With Bandai Namco on the development team, Pac-Man was added as an unlockable character. Over the years, aside from the aforementioned second generation of consoles and PCs, Pac-Man and much of its sequels and spin-offs were ported to many other platforms. On March 13, 1982, Bally Midway released Pac-Man Plus. It was basically an upgrade kit for Namco Pac-Man boards. The game was basically the same, except that Pac-Man and the ghosts went much faster, and when the ghosts turned blue, they looked like plants. Aside from these cosmetic changes, there were also a few slight gameplay changes, such as the bonus item turning ghosts both vulnerable and invisible, and doubling their point values. And sometimes eating a power pellet can have unpredictable results, like one of the ghosts not turning blue, or the maze turning invisible. And in addition to their speed, the ghosts were more aggressive, making the game more difficult than the original. This game was never officially ported to home consoles. To this day, the original Pac-Man has sold over 48 million copies on home consoles and has generated over $14 billion. Most of the revenue came strictly from the original arcade game, and Pac-Man himself remains one of the most iconic video game characters of all time. However, with success came competition, most notably in the form of a carpenter battling an 800-pound gorilla. But that's all a story for another time. Thanks again for watching Gaming Delight. Until next time, happy gaming!